Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode. I'm so excited you are here. Today, we're going to talk about how to strip your identity away from your job because it is a bigger problem than I think a lot of people even realize it is. I think some of you might realize that your identity is fully wrapped up in your job, but I don't think a lot of people understand how deeply it is. And so I want to talk about first, like what the problem is and what I want you to start doing in order to start separating that self-worth that so many of us are taught to put into our jobs and start being able to find it in other things so that if your job goes away, if you want to change it, you don't have this really big psychological barrier that keeps a lot of people stuck. So here's the thing. I don't think people understand how much of our self-worth is caught in our jobs. We are taught from a very young age that your entire self-worth is based in how quote unquote successful you are. This is why so many of us have deep, deep issues with failing, with trying things new, because we see that success and failure. It's not just like, oh, I tried something and it didn't work. It's like, I'm a failure, right? And so we have this like, I'm a success or I'm a failure, depending on what I do. And then obviously, like, I don't have to tell you, society has created random meanings, random connotations with certain professions. So certain professions are seen as more prestigious. They are seen as harder to get into, harder to attain. And so they become more lucrative. But with it comes also this character, I don't know, attachment. I don't know what the word is, but like basically you are conferred some beliefs by society about the type of person you must be because you are that. Okay, so for a lot of us, like I'm sure you kind of understand this already. Like when I say a teacher, what do you think, right? Even though there's millions of teachers and they all have different personalities and they all show up likely differently and they're different skill levels. Like when I say I'm a teacher, you likely are thinking like, oh, I'm a nurturing person. I'm caring. I like to give back. I love children. I must love children. I'm likely patient, right? Those traits are conferred onto that profession. And so for anybody that goes in that profession, whether you want those traits or not, you sort of by proxy get it, right? And so I think for a lot of us, we have these heuristics. Our minds, the way that our brain is made is that it has to create shortcuts, right? When I hear the word teacher, I can't reinvent it every time. Be like, well, what's a teacher? What does a teacher do? Like I would never get anything done if every time I heard a word, it was the first time. You start creating shortcuts like, oh, this means that, right? And everything I've learned growing up also gets kind of stereotyped in that. I know like stereotypes have a bad connotation, but they actually just make life worth living, like easier to live. Because if we didn't have it, we'd have to discover everything new for the first time. We create all these shortcuts like, okay, if I have this, it's generally more likely than not that it is X, Y, and Z, that this is also a part of it, right? You start kind of creating these connotations, meanings around words. We do this with everything, obviously, right? But specifically with professions as well, we have all learned like what a certain profession means in our society. So we just talked about teachers. If I say I'm a doctor, what comes to your mind? Like just think of the words, the adjectives and stuff that you might think. I guarantee you that a lot of them are very similar to other people's minds. You might think smart, like intelligent, hardworking, caring, right? It's another caring profession, somebody that cares about people, wants to like heal people. There's certain traits that come along with being a doctor. Being a lawyer, what comes to mind? Now, you might have a lot of various thoughts. It might be smart. It might be disciplined. It might also be ruthless. It might be power hungry. I don't know. You might have other thoughts about that. But you get what I'm saying, that by labeling yourself as something, you're not just conferring. When someone says, what do you do? And I say X, it's not just that thing. It's everything that comes with that, right? It's all of the connotations that come with that. And if that thing has been determined by society to be valuable, which by the way is completely made up, like why is being a lawyer prestigious? I don't know. We've made up our own language that, excludes other people from doing their own contracts. But like when you think about it, like somebody being able to read contracts or certain papers, like why is that in society? Why have we decided that somehow makes somebody smart or something, or I don't know, prestigious, but we have. So we've made up these rules about what certain things mean. And we also, there's also like I said, I mean, it might be bad connotations like power hungry. We also do have like, whether bad or good, like you might think with a teacher, you might consider that they aren't paid that much, right? Like if someone says they're a teacher, the thoughts you might have about their income or their lifestyle is going to likely be stereotypical of like what you think a teacher makes. Same thing with a lawyer, which is like so funny because I think people think like lawyers make all this money. And I think like 80% of lawyers don't make more than $100,000. Like they make less than $100,000 or something like that. Some like insane stat. So again, not that the stereotypes are right, but they're just that they are there. And so I think for a lot of us, when we have grown up in this paradigm of success, failure, and you have to work towards, whatever it is that you picked to work towards, you also picked it thinking of those traits, right? Maybe you wanted to do the job, but you understood what it inferred about you in order to, like, let's say if you were going to be a vet or you were going to be a nurse or you're going to be in the military or whatever, it means something. And for a lot of us, we work really hard to get to where we are and we, get that quote unquote success. And it becomes reinforced every time we tell people what we do. And in our culture, what's the first question people ask you? What is the first question that anybody says is, what do you do? Like, hi, I'm so-so. Like, what do you do? I'm a lawyer. What do you do? And so you have practiced saying that. And I think when you have never not had to say it, I don't know if this makes sense, but when you've only like, obviously you're in school and whatnot, like when you're a student, you say you're a student, but if you've only ever like had an answer ready, like you've worked all the time, you've never really had it, times where you haven't worked or you don't know what you're doing, you don't realize how uncomfortable that question is, how jarring it could be to ask people what they do when they are trying to figure it out, when they are doing something where it's sort of maybe even looked down upon, or, like I'll give you my example in a minute, but how uncomfortable that question can be. I think when you have never had that, you think it's just like a very innocuous, like kind of just getting to know someone, like, oh, what do you do? But it conjures up so many thoughts. And so for a lot of us, when we have been able to say, like, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm an engineer, I'm a, software, I'm a UX designer or whatnot, each time it solidifies these neural pathways that you have that confer what you think that other person thinks about you. And so when you have to leave that, a lot of it becomes really hard for a lot of us because it's like, well, who am I if I'm not this person? This has now become a part of my identity. And obviously, the longer you work in that field, the more that connection becomes strong. And so many people end up feeling stuck, not because of money. Like oftentimes it is like, let's say you have to stay in the job, but so many people could leave, but they just can't get around this identity of like, who am I if I'm not this? What am I going to tell people if I'm not this? And I don't think people realize how strong of a motivator that is to stay, how much that keeps people stuck more than figuring out what I want to do next. What is the finances? Can I leave? I can't tell you how many, especially if you are in a profession that is seen by the public as extremely like prestigious or successful. Like it becomes even stronger, right? When I was a lawyer, and not for nothing, like my whole life had been really focused around this goal of becoming a lawyer. I had spent so many years trying to become a lawyer, going to law school, being a lawyer. So a lot of my identity felt like this is all I've thought about for the last 15 years, like if I leave this, then who am I? But it wasn't just that. I would be lying if I said that I didn't get a dopamine hit every time someone asked me what I did and I said lawyer. And I saw the surprise on their face a lot of times. Like that was even more satisfying because at the time I was young, I was like 27, 28. I was a woman. I looked younger than I was. I think like in my late 20s, I still look like I was in my early 20s. And so I would get a lot of times like a shocking, like, what? You're a lawyer? And that is a level of, I can't even describe that level of like kind of a dopamine, like feeling successful, feeling accomplished, feeling like, I did this thing that people are impressed with. And I used to think that it made me like instantly I got that validation of like, now they know I'm smart. Now they know I'm a hard worker. Now they know I'm a badass or whatever else silly thing I thought it was. And I remember saying to my husband when I was thinking about leaving, if I'm not a lawyer, then what am I? Which is wild to think about, right? It's wild to think about. As if my identity had anything to do with the thing that I did every day. But I truly felt that way. Like, I don't know how to answer this question now when people ask me what I do. And I remember how panicked I felt of like, how am I going to get them to understand that I'm smart, that I'm still, I don't know, impressive or whatnot. Like, I so desperately wanted people to think that about me that I was willing to stay in a profession that I hated, that I was very miserable in, so that other people had a different, like positive impression of what I was doing. And now add on to that, like, I mean, this was a couple of years between that, but like, I remember when I wanted to become a coach, my God, like, think about the mental hurdles I had to jump because my brain was like, wait, we're going to tell people we're a coach now? Because there's a different connotation with that. And it's not that great, right? And I had to really like sit with like, what does this mean about my identity? If I tell people I'm a life coach, I still struggle with this, by the way, like people's reaction with life coach. You don't get the instant dopamine hit of like, oh, you're so smart or whatnot. You get much different reactions. I mean, to your face, people are lovely usually, but I know what people think. I know what I thought. And so I was definitely had a lot of thoughts about that. And so I know that a lot of people that I coach also struggle with this, right? People that have been doctors for a lot of years, that have been professors, that have like worked their way up through academia, that have been engineers. And it's like there is a lot of status that is conferred onto you because of that title. And we mistakenly think that that is who we are. And it's not to say that you don't have those traits, you do. Whether you are in that profession or not, if you're smart enough to be a doctor, you are smart whether you are a doctor or not, right? That's just like your intellectual ability. If you were a hard worker and you could work insane hours to become a surgeon, you are still a hard worker, whether you're a surgeon or not. But we don't have this shortcut of like everybody kind of being on board and understanding that. And when I was a lawyer and I was quitting, I was going to take a year off. And I'm embarrassed to say this, by the way. It's not to say that I think like it's just the truth. So I feel like we should talk about it because people don't talk about it enough in society. But I was really terrified to tell people that I was staying at home with my kids because there was this connotation about not just about being a stay-at-home mom, but about being a woman that had been in this really prestigious field that was really hard for women to kind of climb, and then leaving that to quote unquote just be a stay-at-home mom. I had so much messaging in law school, in the legal community about how terrible it was for so many women to leave. I had somebody say during law school that like if you planned on staying home with your kids, then you were wasting a space at that because it was a prestigious law school that someone else could take. There's so much messaging behind it, right? There was so much of like, am I just this quote unquote person? What does this make me? What is my identity? Am I just this mother now? Am I just this whatever? And I really struggled hard when people would ask me after I left what I did for a living. I would go into this like diatribe. I would go into this long-winded explanation of everything that I've ever done in my life just so that they had an understanding that like, no, I used to be a lawyer and all this stuff because like I wanted them to see me in a certain way. And that's what a lot of this identity is around. I want you to get really clear on that. It's not about even what you feel. It's our fear of like, what are other people going to think about us? right? What are other people going to think that I couldn't hack it? Are other people going to think I'm not smart enough? Are other people going to think I'm not good enough? Are other people going to think that I'm a failure? And so it's wild to me how many people stay in professions that they are miserable in, that they're on like antidepressants, anti-anxiety, having, panic attacks, suicidal. Like we have a very high suicide rate in both the law, in the medical industry, and a lot of these industries. And and it's not to say that that's the only reason people stay, but I do think that for so many of us, we have worked so hard to be that quote unquote success, and we think that that success is us, right? And if I don't have that, then who am I? Then I'm not successful. And I can't explain to you how important it is to do this work, regardless of if you feel super strong about that identity or not. We all have these identities around things that are not who we are at our core. And one easy way for you to think about it is, who are you if it is not in relation to anybody else? So, like, I am a mother. That is not my entire identity. It cannot be, right? God forbid if something happens to my children, or like if I didn't have children, I wouldn't cease to exist as a person. It is just a role that I have. I am a wife. That is not my identity. And if I classify myself in how I can serve other people, whether that's in my job and how I serve people as a lawyer, or as a coach, or as an entrepreneur, or as I serve people as a daughter, as a friend, as a wife, a mother, right? It's always in relation to other people. I'm not saying that our community ties are not important. They are. And it's not to say that that does not help you kind of figure out what your identity is, what your values are. It's not to say that it has nothing to do with it. I'm just saying, like, conceptually think about it, of like, if these ties did not exist, if I didn't have to work, who do I become? It's not that I no longer exist. It's not that I don't have traits anymore. Who am I if I'm not working in relation to somebody else? And you have to get really clear on that. And that is one of the hardest questions to answer, because most of us never sit with it for even a second. Most of us are never taught to even ask ourselves that. Like, who am I if it is not in relation to other people? If I'm not serving other people? Especially for women, by the way, because women have been taught by the patriarchy from when we are born that our only value, our only worth comes in how we can serve other people. Our only worth is in, men that find us desirable, or the work we can put in as mothers, or the work we can put in as wives, or, whatever it might be. And so you have to do the work to separate that. And part of the way that is interesting is to really think about, what do the people that love you, what do they love about you? Most people, I'm not saying that they don't love anything that you can do for them. So like, this is a tricky one, but it isn't what you're doing for them. Most of your friends, your family, like, yes, part of it might be that you're caring, right? And that might be part of your quality that people love about you. But there are things that within each of our personalities that people are drawn to, whether maybe you're funny, maybe you're creative, maybe you make every day kind of feel really spontaneous and unique. Maybe you have an infectious amount of energy and you make people happy around you. Maybe you're really thoughtful and you really take time to kind of learn things and dissect them and come up with really interesting kind of observations about the world. Maybe you're an incredible listener and you help people really feel seen. Maybe you are a great talker and you entertain people or whatnot. Like, you get it. Like, we all have these personality traits. That is the essence of who you are. And it's fascinating, like, as a mother now, like, to look at my children and observe this. Because obviously, like, I love my children irrespective of what they can do for me. It's not that they do something that makes me love them, right? It's simply for who they are. And what's fascinating is I don't love them because they are successful at something. I don't love them because, like, they are good at sports or whatever. I will love them regardless of what they do or what they accomplish. And what is really fascinating is that, and I think if you have children or you even are around children, you kind of see They have very distinct personalities from when they are born. They have very distinct personalities of who they are, of how they interact with the world and how they see the world and how they move through the world. And it's so fascinating for me to watch. And there's so much to love about it, right? In their approach to things, in their demeanor, in their reactions, in the way they see the world and what excites them and how they show that excitement. All of those things make me love them more. Make me love like that unique personality. Like my daughter is so different from my son. And I know as they grow, those parts of their personalities are going to grow. That is their identity. It is not a clean like box where you can say this person is X and that person is Y. That's not how identity works. That's not how your worth works. You are 100% worthy simply by being born. It doesn't change all of a sudden as you get older. It doesn't change to say like, well, if you have a better job, then all of a sudden you're more worthy, right? It's not to say like imagine if you did this with children where you're like, you're in a preschool class and that kid draws a little better, so they're a little more worthy of love than the other kids. Like, it's so absurd, right? Like, obviously all the kids are equal amounts of worth. Same thing with humans, like adults. It's not like, oh, once you turn 13, this is the cutoff. 15 maybe, now you're only worthy if you are successful in sports or you get good grades, or you got into that college or you got into that grad school. No, all that shit is made up. And again, you may understand this intellectually. Like when I say this, you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Of course we're all worthy. But but there's one thing to intellectually understand something and there's another thing to emotionally understand it within yourself. And society is not going to do it for you. Okay. Other people are going to think like, oh, that CEO that makes all this money is rich. Like, I don't know. They're going to confer something onto that person. Maybe they'll think he's more worthy in some way. Or maybe we look at movie stars and they have, all the money and the fame and the looks, and we think they're better in some way. These are just made up things that we've put onto it. And people are going to do that, but you have to work on stripping that from yourself. You have to work on understanding that like what happens in your job is not a reflection of the worth that you have. It's tasks that you're doing in a day. It's a made up profession that you chose that gets you money, that can help you kind of pay your bills. Great. Congratulations, right? It has nothing to do with your worth. And you have to like sort of learn to remind yourself of that. And I think that it's really important to do this work so that if you want to change it, so that if your profession goes away, so if you get fired, so that if you want to try something else, you understand that you leaving a profession does not in any way change who you are. It simply means you are now going to do different tasks. That's it. But you can only do that if you start stripping away that identity that you have based on that profession. Now, again, you can look at those qualities and understand that you still have those qualities. I'm not saying that you have to like not think like, well, even though I'm a lawyer, it doesn't mean that I'm smart. No, I'm not saying that. It means that like regardless of whether you're a lawyer or not, you're smart. Like the values that you think are so important to being a lawyer has nothing to do with being a lawyer. It's just the character traits that you have. You're smart and you're hardworking and you're persistent and you're really analytical and you pay attention to details and you think in a way that other people don't think. All of that is going to come with you wherever you go. All of that is still your identity. Now, it's not packaged up in a cute way that you can say at like a cocktail party when someone asks you what you do. Sure. But that doesn't in any way change who you are and how worthy you are and what you can accomplish. And I think that the more you get solid, the more you get grounded in your own self-identity, in your own worth as a person outside of the job, the easier it becomes for you to see so much possibility in your life or to see so many different paths, because none of them are threatening to your self-worth, to your self-identity. None of them is saying like, if you go from being a doctor to a coach or a lawyer to a coach, that doesn't in any way make you less worthy. It's simply something that you've chosen to do because it seems more interesting now, or it's, being a doctor served something for some part of your life and now you're trying to try something else. I feel like it's one of the core pieces that allows you to try new things, that allows you to change your careers and change your identity as you grow and let yourself evolve, because you know that at your core, you're not changing who you are. You're just changing the things that you're experimenting with. And so I want you to just spend some time, like I said, like one of the things that you can do is write down or go to if you can't even think about it, don't worry about it. Go to the people that you love the most, that you have like a safe relationship with, that you feel comfortable asking, and just ask them what they love about you. I promise you, they're not going to say, like, I love that you're a lawyer. They're going to say the qualities that they love about you. That is who you are. And start like reminding yourself, even if that's within your profession, that's the thing that you do. I want you to start reminding yourself of those qualities. Like I want you to see it every day. Like, yes, I am someone that is thoughtful. I am someone that is genuine. I am someone that cares about other people. I am somebody that is funny, that makes people laugh. That doesn't change with what I'm doing. The more you can see that, the more you can understand that, the easier it becomes to let go of these like random labels, these outside things that we think we need in order to feel good about ourselves. You don't. You get to feel good about yourself just for being the person that you are. I promise you there's so much value in that has nothing to do with your job. Hopefully we can come up with like a question that we can ask people that can showcase that. Actually, I do. I just heard a question that I think is so much better than like, what do you do? Somebody was saying like, what are you excited about right now? Or, what are you working on that you love right now? And it might be like outside of work, right? Like it might give people an opportunity to talk about something that is so much more interesting than what they do on the day to day. But that's, a step for another day. We're not going to change all of society. So you have to change how you think about it. And the more you do that work, the easier it will become for you to start shifting your identity. And if you want help shifting your identity, I love doing this work. And I love helping people to see how much more they are than their job so that they can start figuring out what it is they want to try and that they want to experiment and not be handcuffed to something because they think that somehow that makes them better or more successful or acceptable to people. So if you want help with that, you can join the Quitter Club, which is my membership where we do this work day in and day out. We have weekly coaching calls, and you will get the help that you need to kind of change these beliefs that you have about yourself. You can go to lessonsfromaquitter.com/quitterclub to get on the wait list. We're opening doors soon, and I would love it to have you in there. Until then, I'll see you next week for another episode.